No. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
One of the simplest ways to cut through delusion and engage with reality as it is the whole issue of doing, and all, which is related to the issue of focus. For example, you arrive here tonight, you walk into the room, and what is it exactly that you're doing? Well, you might be looking around and picking a chair to sit in, and you walk over to it, and you sit down, and maybe look down, whatever. And you might say that's what you're doing. But in actuality, what you're doing is experiencing everything that you're experiencing at that moment. Your inherent intelligence has a profound and intimate engagement with everything that appears in your experience spontaneously in real time. So that what is, as soon as you see this room, you see all of it at once, and you're immediately, in that very seeing, instantly, intimately engaged with everything you see. Oh, you wouldn't see it, it wouldn't show up. And yet, we typically don't think of that as something we're doing. We typically think of that as just a given, a background, a neutrality that's just sort of there, showing up. And what I'm doing is I'm sitting here. You may think you're sitting in a chair listening to a talk, or whatever it is you think you're doing, or you may be wiggling your fingers, or you may be, whatever you might think you're doing. But you're actually doing every single thing that is showing up in your experience. You are engaging it most intimately. That's the actual action. And interestingly, if you look at what is doing that, look at the intelligence. The intelligence that engages with what seems to be in focus in your experience, like, for example, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about something, or I'm getting thirsty, so I'm going to take a drink of chai, or something like that, sort of the focus, the focal point within the full field of experience, whatever you happen to be focusing on. It's easy to think that that's what you're doing, that's where you are. And that intelligence is a conscious intelligence. It's like you might say the egoic intelligence, or it's arbitrarily classified. But the intelligence that is intimately engaged with everything that shows up, even absolute peripherally, like what's showing up in the absolute extremes of your field of vision right now, you are intimately engaged with. What? The you that is engaged with that, what is it? It has a different tenor, a different quality than the you that follows the focus, follows what you may be thinking about. And in actuality, that is the genuine you. Hi, welcome, come on in. And simply noticing this, and noticing the quality of that experience, and especially the quality of that experiencer, will show you what you really are. And is a very fast and easy entry into this yoga. In other words, what you're not focusing on in your experience is you are actually just as engaged with as what you are focusing on in your experience, just at a different level of your consciousness, a different level of your intelligence, seemingly. But it's not a lesser level. On the contrary, it's a more inclusive level. And in fact, every single thing that appears within your experience, you are, what you actually are is completely and 100% engaged with it, or it wouldn't appear. And this is, very contrary to the way that people typically think of their experience. They typically think of the background of experience as just a given. It's just there. It's just showing up, but it's not particularly important. What matters is what I'm focusing on, what I'm engaged with, what I'm, doing this or that. But that's a misnomer. Think of a dream. In a dream, you may see someone that you want to talk to for some reason, and so you're walking up to them to talk to them. And so that's what you think you may think you're doing in the dream. But in actuality, the dreaming consciousness is actively putting every single detail that's appearing in that dream, even if it's completely peripheral and has absolutely nothing to do with the plot line. What you are, your consciousness, is completely engaged with every aspect of it. And this exact identical quality of engagement is occurring, of course, in this state and in all states. Every single thing that appears in your experience, no matter how minutely, what you actually are, what your consciousness actually is completely and intimately engaged with. And that level of intelligence reveals itself. That level of intelligence is very clear. Typically, we may not even think of that as intelligence. We may not even think of that as anything, because it's sort of relative to our egoic intelligence and our emotional intelligence and our personality that we're so used to identifying with. These modes of engagement seem, almost transparent. They seem almost, tenuous somehow, or just very, very objective. And yet that objectivity is what you actually are. That objectivity is the actual event that is occurring here, and always occurring here. This complete, spontaneous, complete and entire engagement with all energy patterns that appear in consciousness. And there's no hierarchy of importance of any one little bit that appears is more or less important than any other little bit that appears, regardless of the fact of whether something seems to be in focus or not. This whole phenomena of apparent focus is very interesting and very tricky, but it's actually not particularly important. From the point of view of our conscious psychology, we place great importance on that. What we're paying attention to, we think is what matters. You walk into a store and you're interested in something, that's the only thing you see, that's the only thing you engage with, that's the only thing you think matters. But in actuality, every single thing that's showing up is, you're completely engaged with it, just by the fact that it's showing up. It wouldn't be showing up if you weren't engaged with it. It wouldn't appear. If it appears, that means that consciousness is completely intimately engaged with it. It's not a conscious consciousness. It's not a consciousness like, this matters to me, let me think about this, what am I going to do about that kind of thing. It's just sort of, it almost seems mechanical. It almost seems, I don't know how to qualify it. But, if we're used to identifying with the small subsystem of your consciousness that is identified with what we're focusing on, which is, a personality kind of orientation or an egoic orientation, and a sense of self as, well, here I am in the situation, what am I doing? Then that is, are we having computer problems?
Yeah, there's a new format for Justin, so she has to restart it.
Anyway, if you're completely focusing on that level, you're focusing on a very, very small subsystem. It's as if you're looking at your computer and all you're looking at is the clock readout in your experience, and what this event here actually is. And this reorientation has profound implications, because the whole quality, character, and nature of the event of the instantaneous apparition of the full field of your experience in real time is a very different tenor, a very different feeling tone, very different implications than the more typical, arguably, implications held by identifying with my personality and my conscious self, and what am I thinking about, and what do I care about, and what do I like, and what do I don't like, and all this, the usual egoic stuff that goes along with our more personality orientation. The personality exists and is real, of course, but it's a very small subsystem of this inherent intelligence which is spontaneously engaging with everything in your experience. It's already the case that is so. Now, not noticing that that's the case is what can be characterized as spiritual delusion. Yoga doesn't consist of developing new capacities or changing something or going into a new condition that is not already the case. Yoga consists of noticing and recognizing and acknowledging what is already the case, what is intrinsically the case, the nature of reality, and one discovers that divinity, the transcendence, and all of these exalted superlatives that spirituality talks about are simply ways of trying to refer to the absolutely indescribable actual nature of what this already is, what you already are. So this is really just a matter of noticing what is already the case. And in that noticing, and in the reorientation that this noticing can affect, you're enabled to engage with your experience much more directly, much more profoundly, and your let's say your intrinsic development accelerates drastically. Another way to put that is that this is always the case. What is going on here could be said to be transcendental intelligence exploring itself. That's fundamentally what this event is. That's fundamentally the only thing that's happening here. Always has been and always will be. But, typically, for most people, we don't see it as that. We don't recognize it as that. We interpret it as, oh, here I am, and I'm me, and I'm in this little body, and I was born X years ago, and I have such and such a history, and I'm really trying to do such and such, but my God, I'm getting older, and my body's falling apart, and this, that, and the other. And this whole narrative of this small subsystem that I'm identifying with, within this vastness of otherness that is somehow not me, and that is somehow my challenge. But this is not actually the case, it turns out. And it's possible to notice that this is not the case by noticing what you, as I've been going over it in some things, what your experience actually consists of, and the way that all of your experience appears in real time, and the level and quality of intelligence that engages with it, that enables it to be perceived, that enables it to show up in your experience. And this level and quality of intelligence is superhuman. It literally is non-human. It is beyond any kind of a human perspective or an egoic perspective, a perspective that anyone, who subscribes to a normal, typical worldview would recognize. So in discovering this and recognizing this and coming to appreciate this, you discover that you are more than human. You are literally beyond the human perspective. You are intrinsically a transcendental intelligence that is just here. I mean, there's intelligence here, right? You're intelligent. It's just here, right? I mean, you didn't do it. You weren't like, let me make some intelligence. Let me put some. You don't have to put it here, right? You don't have to put the light here. It's just shining. The intelligence is just shining. It all just is here as it is, and this miraculous apparition is actually that. It actually is a miraculous apparition. Of course, that sounds very grandiose from an egoic perspective, from a perspective of normal consensus human personality worldview. But that human personality worldview is entirely wrong. And this is readily discoverable for yourself. I've obviously had a couple of cups of tea. So anyway, that's kind of my spiel for the night. So we can chat a bit if you'd like.
Peter, I've been seeing that engagement, there's much more of a presence of engagement in terms of there not being the opposite of disengagement.
Right.
Just that there is just, the thing moving through the water.
Yeah.
And that's all there is.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
And there's never anything else to do.
Yeah.
And So that the idea that there isn't a particular thing to focus on. And also having an awareness of the periphery being as important as the apparent point of focus is interesting, because I find that I have to do less, but by doing very little, nobody notices that I'm not actually engaged in doing anything. And things get done one way or another. But there is a great relief of pressure that there is anything to be done specifically, or anywhere to get to, or...
Well, yeah, this perspective yields the discovery that everything happens spontaneously, everything happens on its own. When you walk into this room, everything that is here to be seen just appears spontaneously. You don't have to put it there. There's no effort involved. You don't have to, put this picture there and by force of will put it. Just like bang, you can't stop it. It's doing itself. And likewise, your own actions and motivations are showing up spontaneously, doing themselves, just as much as something you're seeing across the room is showing up and doing itself. So you don't even have to do your doings, because your doings are being done. Your doings are just showing up, because your doings aren't actually a special category. They aren't actually a special class. There's just a different, it's just another aspect of energy presence. That picture on the wall is spontaneously present. The thoughts in my mind are spontaneously present. The urges of saying this word or that word as I speak is spontaneously present. And there's no hierarchy of spontaneity in terms of a thought that's in my mind or a word I'm saying and that picture being there. They're all just objectively appearing in a totally mysterious, miraculous, and unstoppable way. I can't stop my field of vision from appearing. It can't be done. I close my eyes and it changes, but it still appears. If I leave my eyes open, it changes anyway. Right? But it's unstoppable. It can't be manipulated. I can't stop thinking. I can't control what I'm going to think next. Thoughts just appear, just like that golden Buddha across the room just appears. I don't have to do it. I don't have to do my thoughts any more than I have to do the golden Buddha. And more profoundly, perhaps, I can't not do my thoughts any more than I can make that golden Buddha somehow not appear. What is, just is. And this isness is a profound engagement of consciousness, a profound engagement of intelligence. Or you wouldn't experience it. Right? And when you see something, that's the fact that you see it means that your consciousness is engaged with it. Or how would you see it? And this engagement is an event. It's a doing. It's an act. It's an action. If consciousness engages actively, what appears shows up actively. And that active and this active are the same active. Good idea.
Did that appear spontaneously?
I'm sorry?
Did that appear spontaneously?
Of course.
Well,
evidently. No one here did it.
Just noticing how addicted I am, or we are societally, to having things appear in material form as evidence of this, needing to either see or hear or accomplish or finish or have some sort of reflection of that. So by looking more deeply at the periphery, then there isn't necessarily that reflection there. It isn't any less real, but there's a tendency for me to think that I'm not really doing anything, or I'm not achieving anything because I'm not getting any sort of reflection back from the action that I take, when in fact that isn't true.
As much as anything.
Getting more comfortable with the experience, not having
all apparition leads to other apparition. No, nothing is ever static. Nothing ever appears and is absolutely static. Even if you look at exactly the same thing for an hour and stare steadily, you will have a different experience of every aspect of it every nanosecond. Because the nature of experience is dynamic. It fluctuates. It's not steady. It's all intrinsically and infinitely dynamic. And this is very easy. Most of you have heard me speak, have heard me say this 100 times. Very easy experiment. Sit in front of a blank wall for 5 minutes. Don't need to do a big commitment. For 5 minutes, sit in front of a blank wall, put a light on it, and just sit and look at it. See what you see. After a while, after about 2 minutes, you're going to feel like someone dosed you with acid or something, because it's just this light show and flashing and moving, and you're thinking, well, wait a minute, what am I seeing? The wall's not moving. But experience moves. Experience moves, and there is no wall but experience. The wall shows up because it's showing up as experience. It's showing up experientially. And of course, this is the case with everything. So any apparition, any experiential configuration of energy or characteristics will lead to some other experience, And we see this on subtle levels and gross levels and every kind of levels. You eat food, eventually you excrete. You wake up, eventually you go to sleep. I mean, things change, and you can think of the change as a result of the activity that led to it, but that's kind of heavy-handed. All action leads to more action, which leads to more action, which leads to more action, which leads to more action. Where will that end? I mean, this is what we have. Your experience is like an ongoing movie that never repeats and never ends and never stops, right? I mean, even when this shuts down and you go to sleep, the show goes on, doesn't it? It gets very weird and subtle and nonlinear relative to a waking perspective, but it doesn't stop. It never stops, and it never stops. And so when you see this, of course, this fixating on, results and actions and achievements is seen as very simplistic and even, naive or childish. Because even if you achieve something, what you achieve is going to change. And, you build the pyramids and what happens? They fall apart. Or someone dismantles them to build something else. So where's the achievement? Because anything you do is going to eventually be something else. And in fact, it's something else instantaneously. Because experientially what it is cannot repeat. You can't experience the same thing twice. So you can't actually achieve a stable experience, and nothing exists but experience. So all so-called objects or situations are actually experiences. And since they are experiences, of course, they're infinitely dynamic and unstable. Yeah.
Would you say, so if I'm understanding you right, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at you,
Mm-hmm.
and which is what my personality is doing.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And at the same time, all over the room are other events happening that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not particularly tuned into,
Right.
but are particularly related to who, they're specifically related to me in some way.
Absolutely.
Or
Yeah.
they wouldn't be happening.
Exactly so.
And how far would you extend this all the way across creation? I mean, or would you just extend this to...
Well, creation is your experience. The idea of a creation that's be outside your experience is just an idea that occurs within your experience, right?
But a lot of, as I'm sitting here in the room with you, a lot of parts of the room are outside of my experience.
Right, but if they're completely outside your experience, then they don't exist for you.
Then they wouldn't. Okay, so they
Right.
don't exist until but then you would be saying, if I'm understanding you right, if they don't exist for me, they would only come into an existence when I experience them.
Yeah, because there's no them other than the experience.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I can talk about that golden Buddha that's behind you that you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear the words, but you're not seeing the golden Buddha. I might be lying. I might be talking about a tin Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm lying about the golden Buddha and it's really a tin Jesus. Maybe I'm lying about the tin Jesus and it's really a golden Buddha. Maybe it's neither. What's it for you? It's nothing for you because it's just hearsay.
Mm-hmm. And yet, it's nothing for me, but at the same time, everything in this room is somehow here because it's partly my creation.
Yeah, everything is in your experience. There is no room.
Okay.
The portion of the room which is in your experience is the only room.
Okay.
Because a room is just a name. I can tell I'm in a room because I see walls. But seeing walls is an apparition within my field of vision. You know, I could go outside and say I see clouds, but the clouds are just an apparition within my field of vision. There's no clouds. It's just an apparition within my field of vision. There may or may not be clouds in some objective sense, but that's completely unverifiable. I mean, think of a dream. You know, where are the things and the people you dreamed about last night right now? Where are they? You know, where are the clouds right now? They're exactly the same in the same condition as the people you dreamed about last night. You're not seeing them now. They don't exist for you experientially. They may or may not exist. The dream you had last night may have been, you may have actually gone to some other world and experienced some things that were objectively there, that are somehow still there. But you can't know that. As far as you're concerned, the only actuality of the dream is your experience of it, just like the only actuality of this room is your experience of it, right? Suppose you've never been to this room. Suppose I say there's a room that you've never been to, that you're never going to go to. How is that any more or less real than something you dreamed about last night that's completely gone now and you're never going to experience again? Or how about a dream that you're never going to dream? I mean, how real is that? And is that any more or less real than this room that I can claim that exists that you've never been to and you're never going to go to? It's the particular room I'm thinking about is real for me because it's in my experience. But I bet you've never been there, and I bet you're never going to go there. Maybe you will. But if you do, you won't know it's the same room I'm talking about. And in fact, it won't be the same room because it'll be your experience of it. You know, everyone here is in a different room because you're in your experience of this room, which is completely different than anyone else's experience of this room. Right? I mean, it's just simply acknowledging the only actuality is experience. Objects, you know, we usually think of objects actually really exist. They're really there, you know. The room is really here, and then there's my experience of it is somehow a small little scraping of the surface of the room which is really there. But it's putting the cart before the horse. When you were born into this world, before you were born into this world, you didn't know the world existed at all. How real was it? You're born into this world, and all of a sudden, you're experiencing it, i.e. you're experiencing your experience, that you may call it. And so your experience is the reality, and the world is just an assertion. Just like your experience is the reality, and the room is an assertion. You know, saying the experiences of the room is just an empty claim. The only actuality is the actuality of experience, right?
But then it really does point to a universe where the only thing that's real in the universe is for me. The only thing I could understand, the only thing that's real for me is what I experience.
It does, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, but at the same time, I can acknowledge that other people have different experiences.
If they existed, they may. You can hypothesize that they do. You can't know anyone else exists, can you? Maybe you're dreaming everyone here, just like the people you dreamed about last night, right? And when you leave this room and don't see any of these people, we're just gone. And for you, we are. I don't know you exist. I know my experience of what I'm calling you exists. Because it exists, which is always now, right? But there was a time when you didn't exist, in my experience, and there probably will be a time when you won't exist in my experience again. That's the only thing I can know for sure. You may or may not actually exist, but that's just hypothesis, and that hypothesizing occurs in my experience, in my mind, which is also in my experience. Right?
So what would you say each of us will what am I responsible for? What are you responsible for?
You're responsible for being what you are. Unfortunately, that's a very easy responsibility to fulfill because you can't do anything else. You couldn't possibly not be what you are. Right? So you can already check that off. Your responsibility fulfilled. Right? You all had a question?
Oh, well, so I just I recently saw a movie about magic, and I mean, so I think, what do magicians do to alter, my experience of reality? And, I mean, like they do sleight of hand or
Right.
some really elaborate stuff too.
Right.
And then how does that actually relate to what I do all the time?
It's exactly identical.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Because magicians don't do anything. Appearing does everything.
Yeah.
So like here I'm going to pick up this cup. I'm not doing anything. My hand is appearing. It's appearing to pick the cup is appearing. It's appearing to pick up the cup. I didn't put the cup there. I didn't put the hand here. And if I look very closely, I didn't even make it move. The urge for it to move just spontaneously showed up, just like this cup spontaneously shows up, just like the hand spontaneously shows up. Here they are. What am I doing? So suppose I pull a rabbit out of my chai cup. Right? Am I doing? How's that any different than the cup? Or how's that any different than you doing anything, or not doing anything for that matter?
Well, I mean, I guess maybe a lot would have to do with, their own, experience, what's at hand for them.
Sure.
Or I mean, it's sort of like a painter, like doing a painting. Well,
Right.
He's got some easels and paint.
Oh yeah, he's intimately engaged. He's intimately engaged experientially with all sorts of minutiae of the apparent process of painting, or in the case of the magician, the apparent process of doing magic. But all of that is just his karma that all of that should happen to be appearing spontaneously.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of the second part of my question. That's how it relates to what I do.
Right. And if you happen to experience that, you say you experience a magician doing a magic show, it's your karma to experiencing it, just like it would be the magician's karma to be experiencing doing it, apparently.
There's sort of anthropological evidence about, like, for instance, some primitive people really can't see themselves, in a mirror, or, I mean, it's just, or they don't have perspective, or, yeah, it's sort of like that.
Sure, exactly. Experience is present, and interpretation of experience is present. But interpretation of experience is a mental event.
Yeah.
And experience is an event on whatever dimension it appears in. It may be sensory event, maybe mental, maybe transmental, whatever.
Anyway, so the way I'm experienced is not any less or any more than what a magician.
Of course not. Exactly the same. Because everything, apparition is always the same. Seeing color is seeing color. Whether the color you're seeing is a magician, or Jesus Christ walking on water or raising the dead, or the sun, or a bum on the street shitting publicly, whatever, it's just a shape appearing in vision.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what prompted me to ask a question about magician, so you were using the word apparition, because that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the only actual event, the only actual doing is real-time, instantaneous engaging with apparition. And it's not even engaging with apparition, like there's an apparition minutes in engaging. Right. The engaging is the apparition.
Yeah.
The apparition is the engaging. It's a yin-yang. Linguistically, it's not, we say in consciousness engaging with an apparition. but it's not actually that deconstructed. It's a unity.
It's instantaneous and there's no separation.
Yeah, no separation.
Yeah.
You know, it's a claim to deconstruct something that is absolutely inscrutable.
Do you have anything to say about personal goals?
Sure. You know, personal goals can seem to appear within the mind, within the personality.
And the person focuses in on them, they can make changes.
Not necessarily. There's no them to make changes. If a seeming focus seems to occur, you know, changes will always happen anyway because everything's continually changing.
Right.
And the changes may or may not accord to some degree with what you're hoping for or wanting or so on and so forth. In actual fact, you never get exactly what you want, right? Because the flow of events is completely unpredictable. Right? You don't never know what you're actually going to be experiencing in the next instant, let alone in the next hour or day or week or year. I mean, and the more broadly you describe something, the more accurate it can seem to be. Right? In other words, I can say that within 2 hours I'm going to be seeing the inside of my car and I'm going to be driving home. Well, that's a broad description that's most likely going to be true.
Right.
But I cannot say exactly what I'm going to see. I cannot say exactly what my eyes are going to happen to rest on at any given instant. I cannot say exactly what I'm going to be feeling at any instant. I cannot say exactly what I'm going to be thinking at any instant. So when you start getting precise, these sort of generalizations reveal their inaccuracy. And all sorts of goals in human orientation are based on really sloppy descriptions. When you begin to get down to the actual details of experience, you discover uniqueness, you discover spontaneity, you discover absolute unpredictability.
Yeah.
It's just self-evident.
I feel like I have a goal that I want to be a better listener.
Sure.
So, and it seems that I listen more
Mm-hmm.
to that goal and bring forth as much.
Sure.
It seems that it required other changes, that I have to quiet down a bit. It's
Sure.
a little bit less strong. It seems if I focused in on that goal, it seemed, at least up to this point, that there's some modest success.
Sure. Yeah.
And my evaluatory mechanism says, oh, you're a better listener.
Right, sure. But if you look very, very closely at every step of your actual experiential progression, you know, every single step of it is actually a surprise, and every single step of it is spontaneously occurring, and every single step of it is, you know, in profound ways other than what you're expecting it to be or what you're thinking of it as being. And so
I'm surprised that goal even arose.
Sure, exactly, sure. Yeah.
So it may not be my goal. It may
Sure.
just be better listening appears.
Sure. Well, it is your goal in the sense that you are that which is doing all this. The real you is that, even if that's not a you that you're used to identifying with, right?
Yeah, along those lines, it's really interesting because I always want to travel and want to go experience this and experience that. And I'm experiencing so much by just staring at the wall that I don't need to go anywhere. And like I went to even buy a plane ticket and go on this long trip, and I'm just like, within 5 minutes of even thinking about when and how and all the logistics, I was just like, I'm just fine right here. And all of that kind of goal, it was based on something that I kind of had made up, that it just seems way more.
Yeah. Our narratives and our descriptions of our life and what we're planning and what we think we're doing and what we want to do and all that are always based on a gross oversimplification. When you acknowledge your experience in the details that it actually exists, you discover it's inconceivably rich, it's inconceivably interesting, it's inconceivably unpredictable, it's inconceivably entertaining, surprising. I mean, every instant surprising. You're going to get up tomorrow morning, and everything that's going to be appearing in your experience is going to be completely unexpected. It's like, wow, who'd have thought? You know, you don't need to go anywhere, or not. You don't need to not go anywhere. It just is irrelevant.
Totally.
Because that will be surprising too, but no more or less surprising. You know, normalcy cannot occur in terms of boredom, because you will always be in a completely unexpected, entirely surprising actuality, because you cannot know exactly. I could not have known we would be having this conversation. I could not have known you would say these words and I would say these words. I could not have known Iuld see what I'm seeing right now. How could I know that? I mean, this is amazing. It's a trip. It's, you know, just completely entertaining.
Sleight of hand.
Sure, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And it is sleight of hand, like what's doing it? You know, where's it coming from? Where's it going to? You know, where's the beginning of the talk when I started talking? Where's it now? Where's it gone? It's nowhere. It's just nowhere is the dream I had last night. It's just nowhere is what I'm going to be doing tomorrow right now.
Well, it's all magic.
It's all magic.
It's all magic.
It's all magic.
The ability to say it's magic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. But the wonderful thing, the practical thing is you can see that, you can notice that, you can discover that, and it is self-verifyingly true that that's the case. And that's the whole point of this yoga. I mean, that's why I bothered to call it a yoga, because it's actually something that is doable. It's actually something practical. It's not just theoretical.
Don't some people create the experience of boredom? Or they think that they create the experience of boredom?
Sure, they may think, sure, absolutely, of course, obviously. Boredom, if boredom seems to be occurring, then it's essentially being manufactured through a process of denial of the details of what's appearing, of the spontaneity of it. It's like, damn, nothing happening. We've been sitting in this damn room for 45 minutes. How boring. God, I'm so bored. Something hasn't happened. You know, that's narrated into existence. It's a description, it's a vastly oversimplified description, which is being imposed on an actuality of absolute spontaneity, absolute unpredictability, absolute amazing and surprising detail. You know, so it's like hypnosis. You know, it's like, oh, nothing is happening here. You know? Nothing is changing. It's all dull. It's all stupid. I'm really bored. I mean, yeah, you can hypnotize yourself into anything. And this is exactly how these kinds of overly simplistic, frustrating worldviews are created. The whole idea that anyone is a separate person, or that you're a limited being, or that you're separate from the world, are all similar, ultimately hypnotic suggestions of denial. The actuality of experience completely nakedly and explicitly displays exactly what it is and exactly how it is. You know, just look at the field of your experience and you'll discover absolute spontaneity, absolute instantaneity. It only exists in the instant. I mean, how weird is that? The past is completely gone. It's just like gone. It may as well never have happened. The future is like completely not here. It may as well be nothing. And the present has no duration. Zero duration. I mean, look at that. You know, it's fucking trippy. It's bizarre. It's absolutely inconceivable. It's literally inconceivable. But it's explicit. It's obvious. It's completely, you know, here to be seen. You know? And the absolute instability of experience. The fact that experience, you know, never changes, never repeats, always changes, is again completely obvious. And yet in the face of that, we create repetition, we create normalcy, we create dullness, we create stuckness. And it's only created as a hypnotic assertion, because the evidence of experience does not support those assertions. So the only way to hold to those assertions is to do it through denial, through essentially hypnotic mechanism, which is exactly what happened. I mean, all the people wandering around in frustrated worldviews, what we call in spirituality delusion, is basically living in a hypnotic condition.
Along with that moment in the now, there seems to be a yes, or an appreciation or a joy that goes with it.
Sure.
And it is just part of it, but it seems to be, no, it's not, but it seems to be an additional something that happens at the same time.
Well, this actuality, call it the totality of your experience in the present moment, which is the only actuality, of course, that you can find. This actuality is very multidimensional. It's not just mechanical. It's not just inert. It's not just a dull, something sitting there. It's, on the contrary, it's supremely intelligent, supremely meaningful, supremely alive and dynamic, supremely purposeful in its own very nonlinear, transcendental terms. And of course, all of these aspects are nakedly displayed because they're part and parcel of it. And when we begin to see it in its own terms, this becomes very obvious. And yeah, I mean, all of these, we've all heard in spiritual literature, realization is bliss, God is love, this is an infinite light shining in eternity, and all these wonderful, spectacular hyperboles, and they're all literally true as far as they go. But all they're doing is reflecting or trying to express partial aspects of this completely transcendental actuality that is just the absolute normalcy of your momentary experience. Try and say that backwards. Try and say it forward.
Peter, there is a dimension also which really feels like nothing.
Sure. And there's infinite dimensionality to this, and aspects of that dimensionality are so transcendental that they basically look like nothing or non-existence.
Void.
Sure.
It really takes
absolutely
to stay there.
Yeah, but again, you can't actually stay there because it's not a separate thing.
I know.
It's just an aspect. All these aspects are irrationally and not very coherently included in this actuality. This actuality has infinite dimensions and aspects, and they don't necessarily make sense in terms of each other. What's happening here is not coherent or linear, or it doesn't play nice. It's not just one simple thing. Obviously, I mean, look at this amazing, diversity of qualities and experience and dimensions and so on and so forth. And all of these different nodes are, can be found in it. Absolute nothingness can certainly be found. Absolute just light can be found. Very specific material, detailed functioning can be found. All these things can be found just by looking at it in a certain way, so to speak. But they're all just this, and none of them actually exist independently of the others. They're all just aspects of this, and none of them have more or less importance than the others. The realm of nothingness, or the realm of just absolutely infinitely shining light, or the realm of complete bliss and love, or a realm of just mechanical detail of quarks flashing around and interacting infinitely. There's no better or worse there. They're just different ways of looking at. It's like looking at the same thing from different angles. It all comes with it.
It really takes maturity to go with it, to fall with it.
Well, it does.
Wherever it goes.
And that's the challenge. That's our challenge.
Not react to that.
That's a very good point. This is what does take maturity. And the challenge of the fine points of this yoga, the challenge the challenge of moving into the sort of advanced stages of this yoga is continually one of letting go into spontaneity, of letting go into opening to multidimensionality, and learning to resist the urge to hold it as this or hold it as that or hold it as the other. And a sign of immaturity is latching onto one way of it, or another way, or switching back and forth, or playing off this way versus that way, as opposed to just loosely being with all of it, letting it be what it is. And there's this amazing multidimensionality, and sometimes things seem to come to the fore. Sometimes it's just a mishmash. Sometimes it's, very crystalline, beautiful, lines up, and other times it's just like chaos in the maelstrom. But it's just how it's presenting. But it is what it is, and what it is not dependent on what it looks like. And so, as you mature, you learn to be with what it is, and just let it be whatever it looks like is it. Like someone you love them whatever they look like. They're getting out of bed, or they're covered with dirt, or they shaved all their hair off, or they're naked, or they're dressed up in fancy dress clothes, or whatever. It doesn't matter how they appear, because it's them. And likewise with this. This is what it is, and it has all of these different, ways and dimensional aspects that it can seem to present at, very instably and dynamically, of course. And these things will come to the fore, different things will come to the forefront and assume dominance. But it's not actually changing. Its nature is to be that way. Its nature is to present that way.
It has this quality of communication.
Oh, yeah.
And information.
Yeah, it's profound intelligence, profound communication, profound meaningfulness, regardless of what it looks like. It looks like this when you're awake. When you're asleep, in deep sleep, what's it look like? But it's the same thing. It can look like that. When you're dreaming, what's it look like? It's the same thing, but it can look like that. When you're having a profound divine experience, it's the same thing, but it just looks like that. When you're bored and stupid and pissed off, and someone cuts you off in traffic and gives you the finger, it's the same thing. It just happens to look like that. So this is this. This is what it is, but it can look like anything. But what it is not dependent upon what it looks like. So the trick is to be with this and learn to be flexible, learn to see that the apparitional modes, it's its nature to be mercurial, it's its nature to be, what's the word? There was a wonderful Greek creature in Greek mythology that was
Proteus.
Yeah, Proteus.
Proteus, you like a dolphin
yeah.
in the morning.
It's the nature. Yeah, it's the nature of this to be protean, to appear any which way, but it is what it is, regardless of how it appears, and it is that which does that. It is that which can appear in all of these ways, and it's just nature to do so.
And really it takes maturity, because there are instances when, it's bigger than anything.
Well, it's everything. It's the biggest.
The system is reacting to it very spontaneously.
Well, the system is
You either scream, or you cry, or you laugh, or you...
Sure. And your reaction...
Sure. It's like, what are you saying here?
Sure. But your reaction is it, too.
Yeah.
And your reaction and the maturity of the way you can be with it, that seemingly develops over time, is it. So it is doing all of that. It moves into itself. It comes to be with itself more and more maturely. It comes to know itself. It comes to be with itself less and less naively and more comprehensively. And that's its nature. Its nature is to endlessly move into itself with greater and greater intimacy. And we experience this as spirituality. We experience this as normal maturing in some phases, moving from childhood to adolescence to adulthood, is the same thing. It's just spontaneously moving into itself. But in spiritual terms, we experience the same thing on more levels of subtlety, of this learning to be with itself, more intimately, more profoundly, more accurately, and less being seduced into by misinterpretation, less being seduced by more heavy-handed ways of holding it as being this or holding it as being that.
Because it is essentially non-human.
It's completely non-human.
Non-human.
And this it is you.
And to drop the humanness and go with.
Yeah, humanness is a fantasy.
Yes. Yes.
It's a misinterpretation.
That's when
Yeah, humanness is a fantasy. This is a completely non-human event. You are a completely non-human being, a completely non-human system. A better word perhaps is transhuman.
It's like human and non-humanness and then life and death.
Sure.
I don't know if it's stuff doing big cross-section.
It's probably cooling off by now.
Same
Really nice
kind of
outside.
correlation,
Exactly, sure.
death and life.
Sure.
There was a really interesting interview with an artist who is just now opening 3 separate installations of his work, was working with light and light as an experience. And he was asked what did he learn, or what some of the things that he discovered by working so intensely with light. And he said that he discovered that there is an intelligence there, and the light changes and reacts with the person who is experiencing it.
Sure. There's profound intelligence in light. Just like I said, like I started talking tonight, just in your field of vision, when you see something peripherally, something you're not particularly involved with, there's an inconceivably intimate and multidimensional intelligence in effect, both in what is seemingly being seen, in the way it is being seen, and what is seeing it. So the whole gestalt of that event is pure intelligence. It's pure meaningfulness. It's pure multidimensionality. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we discovered this with the, if you ever do sky gazing experiments or this kind of thing, where you're basically just playing with light, you discover a profound meaningfulness, a profound intelligence that conveys itself in the experience of light, the experience of luminosity. And you discover the same intelligence anywhere you go, because experience itself is intelligence. It's pure intelligence. And it's an intelligence vastly beyond, personality-based intelligence or individuality-based intelligence. You're basically anything at the human level of intelligence, per se. I mean, erroneously considered. The actual human level of intelligence is a transhuman level. Because humans are a myth.
Well, mythological human, mythological chaplain would like to know, what do you mean when you use the word purposeful?
Well, I can't say. But I can't say exactly what I mean when I use any word. Right. Because what is actually here transcends words, it transcends definition, it transcends describability, it even transcends referability. I can't even refer directly to anything. So I can't say what I mean. But nonetheless, I can make the assertion, and I invite you to explore it and find out for yourself what it means. What humans mean by purpose, and what humans mean by purposeful, is an insignificant, pale, minuscule shadow of the actuality of what that really is. But I can't say anything about that, and I can't describe that, because it's indescribable. It's beyond description. It's beyond, it's beyond human language.
Like as you were saying, there's this like immense, inconceivable show going on every instant of it, like the power of the Big Bang. And,
yes.
And then humans want to focus on a particular goal, or a particular purpose, or a particular reflection of their ego, and then this, the grandness
They don't miss the grandness. They don't miss the grandness. They are the grandness, and they are not human. The portion of them, this very small subsystem within that grandness that thinks it's human, misses it. But that's impossible. It's possible to identify with that small subsystem and think that one is nothing other than that. But that is throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because that's not actually the case. Because one is, in actual fact, the totality of one's energy system. You know, one is one's personality, but one is also one's genetic structure. One is also one's, you know, quantum interaction with all energy events in the universe, you know, transspatially, and all this kinds of thing, which is going on in real time is in actuality. You are that. We may not be used to identifying ourselves as that. We may not even be used to even being able to refer to that, but nonetheless, that is actually, factually, the case of what you are. And you are that not just in a theoretical sense or a philosophical sense, but in an experiential and literal sense. But most of our experience, we sense it. We were talking earlier about you know, this heavy-handed denial that occurs largely because of the semantic identification with people. People are so identified with words, and people by and large have hypnotized themselves to not notice or not be able to acknowledge anything that is beyond description. And this really clears the deal, because, you know, the vast majority of our experience is completely undescribable. I mean, how do you describe these little vibes and little subtle moods and little subtle flavors that just sort of walk through experience in the background all the time? There's no words for them. They're not objects. You can't even say where they are or how they are or anything, but they're not unreal. They're actual. They are you. You are them. You are engaged with them. And just because we may not be used to noticing that or acknowledging that conceptually doesn't make it not the case. So again, it's really a matter of noticing what is already the case as it actually is, and one discovers very rapidly that it far outstrips what we're used to describing as what we are and what's going on.
Do you find it as easy to engage with painful experiences as it is to engage with pleasurable experiences?
Sure. Arguably even easier.
Why is that?
Because of the unavoidable nature. Not actually easier, but I mean facetiously easier. You know, when you have a toothache, try to not engage with it.
Well, it is interesting that engaging with difficult experiences and how much energy we put into avoiding them, that actually when we go into them, we know what we think
exactly
they are,
so. Exactly so.
They become quite manageable.
Yeah.
And we don't have expectation around how they should be either.
Yeah, exactly so. Well put. Yeah, when you really go into your experience as it actually is, you discover that, you know, an experience that you would qualify as negative or unpleasant or objectionable or painful is really very arbitrary and heavy-handed. And even experiences that you would describe as pleasurable is very heavy-handed. Experience is so multidimensional. And even one experience, like say you stub your toe, you know, it's such a multidimensional experience to limit it to, oh, I stubbed my toe and it's a stubbed toe and that's just one thing, is bullshit. Because, you know, it's just like a constellation of qualities. You know, some of them are, you know, what you might qualify as physical pain, but there's all sorts of other stuff going on there, right? And the actuality is all of it, not just, you know, the parts we're used to sort of focusing on, saying, oh, I stubbed my toe, it really hurts. You know, and of course every experience analogously is similar. Every experience is equally multidimensional.
Actually infinite in dimension.
That's right. Absolutely, actually infinite.
Would you say that from a certain point of view there's only one experiencer? And
Yes. Not from a certain point of view.
So, okay, there's just the one, and
There's just one experiencer, and it's you. Right? I mean, you know that. Has anyone else ever experienced your experience? And has anything ever showed up outside your experience?
Well, from okay,
Right?
so it's almost you're talking about the larger. I'm talking the larger self, I guess. The larger
Well, there's only one self, but yeah.
Yeah.
And you could say it's pretty. You could call it large. You could also call it small. But anyway, yeah. I'm talking about the actual experience here, which is probably more than what you may be used to thinking of as being the experiencer. But in fact, is and has always been the actual experiencer.
So, when I meet someone in pain and I experience, I feel like I feel like there's another experience there too.
Right.
Their experience.
Right. But that feeling you have is a feeling that you have.
Yeah, that
Like, for example, you might meet someone in a dream who seems to be in a great deal of pain. You might have a lot of empathy for them if you don't know you're dreaming. And then you wake up and you know, oh, there was no one there. But it felt like there was someone there. Or say you're watching a movie and you're really sucked in and you see something horrible happen to this person you really identify with and you go, oh, this is terrible. I didn't see what happened to them. But they're not acting. They're pretending. Nothing happened to them. Special effects. And so likewise, just because you experience something as being a certain way, that only talks about your experience. It doesn't talk about anything outside your experience, as far as you know. Right?
Yeah. So then this idea that I'm experiencing you and you're experiencing me simultaneously.
Right. It's an idea that you're having in your experience.
It's an idea that I'm having in my experience.
Sure.
And that's that.
Look at the reality of me in your experience. I'm an apparition.
But
you see me, you hear me, you may have thoughts about me, you may have, projections about me in terms of, oh, he's really over there, he's really a certain way or whatever, I don't know, right? But before you met me, what was I? What I am right now is exactly what I was before you even knew I existed. I'm no more or less now than I was then, which is your experience.
So we don't co-create. I mean,
No.
a lot of the way I can see, is a lot about relationship.
Sure.
And
but relationship is important. Relationship is important, but relationship is about you. Your relationships are all a vehicle for you to explore yourself. Right?
I can see that. I can feel that. And at the same time, I feel like that I'm curious or wondering as we're speaking about whether what kind if I just see the other as something to do with me.
Right. Sure.
As an experience of me.
Right. Sure.
It seems very, like a very self-centered kind of universe. It seems like...
Is it any more self-centered than it's ever been?
Well, if I hold your uniqueness...
Right. Well, I am unique. I am unique.
And
every apparition is unique. This cup is unique. You've never experienced anything exactly like this cup before or since. This table is unique. This stone is unique. I'm unique. The rug is unique. This person sitting next to you is unique. The fan up there is unique. That fan is not exactly like any other fan you've ever experienced before or since. Right? No, not just facetiously or sophomorically, literally, actually. And so that uniqueness is a vehicle for profound meaningfulness, and it's a vehicle for you exploring meaningfulness, which is ultimately your meaningfulness. Because in actuality, what you are, what is experiencing your experience is the absolute, and it is exploring itself as your experience. As all of these little multidimensional vignettes that present themselves as your experience, as talking to me, as seeing these various things around us, being in this environment, as experiencing your own thoughts and feelings in your body, you know, and as experiencing the ongoing flow of events before and after and so on and so forth. It's all an endless vehicle for you to explore your own meaningfulness. Just like when you dream at night. It's exactly like when you dream at night. The dream at night is a vehicle for you to explore your meaningfulness. There may seem to be other people, you may seem to have very profound interactions with them, right? There may be other objects, there may be, you know, involved complex situations that involve striving and struggling and success or failure or just confusion or whatever, right? I mean, dreams can look like anything. But all of the dreams, all that they are is a vehicle for you to explore your own meaningfulness. And that's exactly what's happening right here. So I'm very important as a vehicle for you to explore your meaningfulness to you. Just like this cup and this table are very important as vehicles for you to explore your meaningfulness.
But you wouldn't go necessarily and say vice versa, that I'm very important for you to...
Oh, you're completely important for me, but that's in a different universe. That's in my universe. In my universe only I exist.
Only our universes are.
No, there's no our universes. There's your universe and there's my universe. There's your dream, there's my dream. They don't interact.
But there's something beyond both of us that's experienced all.
No. You are the all. You are beyond everything. Before you were born, before this world appeared in your experience, you were. This world appeared in you. All the human race appeared in you. The entire human political system in history appeared in you. And when you go to sleep or you die, it all disappears. And yet, there you are. Always. You always will be. You always have been, you always will be.
It's almost easier. I mean,
It's self-evident. It's just like that. This is just simply the pragmatic fact. It's not philosophy or anything. It's just, look at the actuality. How many experiences have you ever experienced? You've only experienced one experiencer. Everyone and everything else shows up as objects in your experience. Even you and your personality and your body are objects in your experience. The you that is experiencing is beyond your body. It's beyond, just like it's beyond my body, it's like it's beyond this table. Your body shows up in your experience. Well, think when you dream. When you dream at night, you may have a body that shows up that you seem to be in. And then you may seem to see other bodies, and the body that you think of as you and the bodies that you think of as others are all may have interactions and stuff. But they're not actually there, and you're not actually there. The body that is you is not actually there. What you are is the dreamer. Exactly the same thing is happening now. What you really are is what is experiencing your experience, which is not in your body. Your body is in it. Just exactly like my body is in it, as an object of experience. Right? This is just self-evident, We're not used to thinking of it that way because people don't usually describe it in those terms. But that's the fault of people's descriptions, not the fault of the actuality.
If you were sitting down with a real materialistic scientist, wouldn't he say there is no consciousness without a brain, and that this is all a fabrication?
He might say that, and I have no problem with that. Yeah. Because a brain is a confluence of quantum events, let's say, and so if consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, then consciousness is inherent in quantum events. So quantum events are consciousness. So you can reduce it all to quantum events or strings or whatever the current theory is, but you've just picked a different fall guy to collapse it all down to. It's the same thing. And any materialistic scientist that's up on his physics would know that the universe is unique for any observer, because you only experience, within your experience, even just materially, you only experience the quantum events which hit you. The light that you see as this cup is not the light that I see as this cup, physically. So therefore, you're seeing a different cup than I am. You literally are. You're seeing different photons than I am. And you may think of the photons that you see as being... So the cup is not a cup. There's one cup that appears in your consciousness as a result of a pattern of photons that are hitting your retina. And there's another cup I see in my consciousness as a result of a pattern of photons that I see in my retina. And it's a different cup. Literally different photons physically. I mean, it's just collapsing it all down to a different paradigm. But it works out the same. I mean, there's one system going on here, and that system is inclusive for any observer. I mean, that's what the physicists would say. And the observer has to be one with the system that is observed, because where else do they come from? I mean, a physicist would be the first to deny Deus ex machina. You know, if there is consciousness, and consciousness is a byproduct of quantum events, which means consciousness is implicit in quantum events, which means consciousness are quantum events, which means quantum events are conscious. So therefore, the matter that you are is consciousness, and that matter, being localized, exists in a unique universe of its point of view. Literally unique universe.
Well, some quantum physicists are saying there really isn't any matter.
Well, that's fine too.
Yeah.
You know, again, it's just a matter of how you want it, what paradigm you want to collapse it down to. But it collapses. I mean, the bottom line is it collapses. It's inclusive. You can't end up with a this that's separate than a that. It can't be done. You know, do the math. It just can't be done. Ultimately, it collapses, and whatever it collapses down to, theoretically, has to be the actuality that is your experience. Because your experience is actual. You can't define it out of existence with a theory. You can't argue. I can't argue your experience out of existence, right? It's just bullshit. It's hot air. I'm full of shit if I do that, because your experience is actual. Period. I can say, well, it's quantum events, or I can say, well, it's transcendental consciousness, or I can say, well, it's the will of God. I can say all these different things, but it is real. It is actual. And so whatever it is has to include that actuality and has to ultimately resolve to that actuality, or vice versa.
When a person is under hypnosis and they're told that there's an elephant in the room, does that mean that there really is an elephant in the room?
No, there's not an elephant in the room, even if there really is an elephant in the room. All there is an elephant in their experience. Yeah. When you dream that there's an elephant in the room, is there an elephant there? Is there a room there?
Is it possible that we experience like auto and then a rebirth, and like there's some chain of events like there has been in our life from like childhood to adolescence to adulthood? Right. Is it possible that that continues past the moment of death into a auto?
Well, it does. In actuality, it does, but what it actually is not accurately describable in those terms, because there isn't actually time. Time is just another mode of the apparition of this.
Most of us would have certainly the experience of once having been a child and adolescent.
Yeah, of course. Sure.
Adult,
of course.
In the same way that there might be, even though it's an illusion.
In the same way, aspects of your experience will look like that, but other aspects will not. And even right now, other aspects don't look like that. Right now, there are aspects of your experience which are clearly atemporal. And we're not used to acknowledging those aspects, so we sort of have blinders on to, like it's...
I can find them now.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I was just speaking to my friend Lynn. You hadn't seen each other intimately for a few years. I said, it's beginning just like no 2 years have disappeared. It just didn't feel like any time had separated.
Sure.
I had that experience.
Child. Child.
What about it?
Totally feels like it.
Well, and Jesus is supposed to have said, unless you become like a little child, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. And this refers to that, If you can recall or extrapolate the experience of a newborn, who experiences just the full field of their experience without qualification. They can't say what anything is. They can't even think what anything is. They don't have anything to compare it to. It's just that just the immediate actuality. And this is the very essence and the very nature of this yoga. Is you have never stopped experiencing your experience that way. There's all these other overlays of education and maturity and the development of limited psychologies and identification with a personality and so on and so forth. But they never stopped or replaced the raw background, the raw foundation of your naive experience of just, you've always been experiencing that, even when there's all these other complexities piled on top of it, but they haven't actually canceled that. They haven't actually obliterated that. And simply letting yourself access that completely unqualified mode of experiencing your experience will reveal what Jesus in this particular quote apparently referred to as entering the kingdom of heaven. You discover that what you actually are, what this actually is completely transcendental, completely unqualifiable, completely infinite. And is directly and immediately and self-verifyingly conveyed as such. This is not theory. This is, just really intimate, obvious discovery. And then you discover that these other layers are not actually mutually exclusive with that layer. So once you discover that layer and become very familiar with it, you can still go hang out in the layers of your personality and your semantic skill and all of that, and it doesn't cancel out or in any way impinge upon this transcendental actuality, which is the actual basis and the actual fundamental condition. I mean, even historically, let alone ontologically, of what the actuality of the experience is. And so, as you develop facility, as you become really skilled at this yoga, you can just hang out in all these different modes, and you discover there's no hierarchy. You don't actually gain anything by being in one mode. You don't actually lose anything by being in another mode, which seems very counterintuitive and seems not to be the case when you're not skilled in this yoga. When this childlike, full-on, full engagement, full bombardment of inconceivability seems very much an opposite condition from the normal psychological condition of identifying with the personality and identifying with historical functioning and so on and so forth. But it turns out not to actually be the case.
Could you say a little bit more?
Sure. In other words, you don't need to just become a gibbering idiot. You don't need to forget how to speak and give your clothes away and just wear a diaper and sit, staring at your navel all day, hoping someone gives you some scraps of food, or not hoping they give you scraps of food. That you can, but you don't actually gain anything by doing that, and you don't actually lose anything by hanging out with people and talking and having a job and doing things you're interested in and all that. Because they turn out not to cancel each other out. They're not mutually exclusive.
I think I'm still stuck in thinking that I'll gain something if I listen.
Sure. Well, that's an easy thing to think. I mean, there's a logic there that seems to have some weight to it. And it may even be true to a certain extent. But that, just because something is true strategically doesn't make it absolutely true. In other words, it may behoove you at a certain point to do some listening, but that doesn't mean absolutely that always being in a condition of listening is the absolute ultimate state, and I'm going to sit here and become an ultimate listener and just always listen. I mean, maybe not, but you can experiment for yourself and discover if that's the case. So again, we're faced with, practical, empirical, strategic advantages. I mean, it's like if you're giving people spiritual advice, to one person, one piece of advice may be very useful to them. To another person, and a completely contrary piece of advice may be useful to them. because nothing is universally true. Different things may be true in different circumstances. Just empirically, practically, you know, it may be good advice to someone to take aspirin. It may be good advice to someone else to not take aspirin.
Right. And I could also see there's a beautiful aspect of not listening.
Absolutely. You know, sometimes talking is beautiful. Sometimes listening is beautiful. Sometimes neither talking nor listening is beautiful. And so it really gets down to an artfulness of participation, an artfulness of navigating and engaging with your functionality skillfully. They call skillful means in Buddhism. What they call adeptship in Western occultism.
On the one hand, I'm not following what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to have our unique experiences
Good.
and interpret what comes to our senses
Absolutely.
in a unique way. And yet, time and individuals, there are individuals who hallucinate,
Mm-hmm.
they're on drugs,
Absolutely.
or they're born with some kind of incapacity
Absolutely.
or something, or special capacity. In any case, there seems to be, just like when you picked up that cup, everybody in the room could identify. They're having a little different experience,
Mm-hmm.
seeing it differently.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, everybody here is going, oh, cup. So when it comes to finding agreement, working with other people, interacting with other
Mm-hmm.
people, it seems like it's very easy to get lost in that experience versus what actually is.
Right.
And a lot of difficulty in life ends up being something of that.
Right. I follow you. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. It becomes, it's important to find a middle ground of acknowledging for you, your perspective is what matters, but acknowledging that for other people, their perspective is valid for them, and their perspective may or may not diverge to a lesser or an extreme degree from your perspective, let's say, but that doesn't matter to you. In other words, you don't need to, just because someone else has a different perspective is not a commentary on your perspective at all. And getting a sense of this can be challenging because, we're all used to relating to people more or less intensively in various degrees. And some of us, again, as you point out, everyone is very different. Everyone's very unique in terms of their strengths and weaknesses and their aptitudes and so on, just the nature of their personalities and so on. And for some people, it can be more challenging to not get lost in sort of the different frameworks and different perspectives that seem to be presented by other people. This is what I hear you talking about generally, and the challenge is to play with that and to try to discover a middle ground where their perspective is fine and valid for them, because they're different than you. The fallacy is the idea that we're all the same, because we are. People are unique. People are very different. And, some people are maybe more similar, closer to some norm, let's say, arbitrarily, that you may think of yourself as being, but in actuality, everyone is different than you. Some people are really different than you. And some people are really, really, really different than you. And their perspective and their whole approach to things is going to be radically different than yours. And that's not either good or bad. It's just the case. It's like, It's like if you have a dog, you can't expect the dog to be like your cat, and you can't expect the dog to be like your kid. And you can't expect the dog to be like your spouse, because the dog's going to be a dog. You know, and it's going to have a certain doggishness in its perspective, and it would be absurd for you to think you have to be a dog, right? Your job is to be the human, but that doesn't mean you can't still relate to the dog in the ways that you can. So it's kind of a way of finding an artfulness of being able to honor and acknowledge and work with things that are different without needing to not be who you are. You know, and not make that an either or. You sort of find the middle ground, kind of a finding, like it's like a balance so that they kind of find some evenness where you can be you and they can be them, and have that all be okay, as opposed to something that needs addressing, or needs fixing, or needs balancing, or something. In other words, imbalance is okay, difference is okay. You know, and that's something that we each have to explore for ourselves and find for ourselves. And for some people, depending on the nature of your personality, that can be more or less of a challenge. You know, but again, this is our challenge.